Hi, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can see me and the sound is good. If you can see me and the sound is good, type in the chat, hey, you can see me, hello, thumbs up. Awesome, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Moses Salami. I'm the NAHSE New Jersey Communications Chair. We welcome you to tonight's virtual panel. Tonight we have two accomplished healthcare professionals that will be joining us, and we are so excited to have them. So to kick things off first, I have a couple housekeeping items. Please, everyone, keep your microphones on mute. This will eliminate any distractions. And then number two, If you have any questions while they're talking or anything like that, please put that in the chat. We have a Q&A session at the end, towards the end of tonight, and we'll be taking those questions and asking either of our hosts those questions. So please, once again, if you have any questions, type it in the chat. Do not be scared, do not be shy. We'll make sure that one of the committee members definitely asks either Deanna or Nikki your amazing question. And next up on the schedule, I would like to introduce you to Wendell Alexis, who is the president of the New Jersey chapter of the National Association of Health Service Executives. Wendell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Moses. Again, welcome everyone to our first virtual conference. I'd like to first start off by introducing and letting everyone know our chapter officers for the NAHSE New Jersey chapter. As Moses mentioned, my name is Wendell P. Alexis. I'm the president. To my right, you'll see our president-elect, Frank Nelson. You'll see, next to Frank, you'll see our secretary, Ilani Page Walden. To her right is our parliamentarian, Anthony Winston. To his right is Byron Smith, our treasurer. To the second row, first on the left, is our immediate past president, Vanessa D. Smith. Our membership committee chair, Chase Stewart. To his right, our community outreach chair, Ashley Clark. To her right is our professional development chair, Louis Alerte. And the man himself, our great DJ for tonight, Moses Salami, our communications chair. So again, I want to go right into my introduction of our first speaker. Her name is Nikki Sumpter. She is a forward-thinking leader, celebrated for inspiring positive change and engagement across large healthcare systems. Nikki Sumpter is the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer for Atlantic Health System. And under Nikki's purposeful leadership, the Integrated Care Delivery System, which boasts over 16,000 team members and 400 sites of care, was honored for the 11th consecutive year as one of Fortune's 100's best companies to work for. Most recently, Nikki was honored with the 2018 Great Place to Work For All Leadership Award, designed to recognize the integral, strategic, and cultural influence of talented women leaders from Fortune, excuse me, from Fortune 100 recognized organizations. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you, Wendell. Thank you.
So, it's a pleasure again to have you with us, and I think we want to go ahead and start off with a few questions.
Okay.
So going right into it, what's one of the things that has helped you in your career progression and growth?
Okay. First, let me start off by saying hello to the NAHSE family. Thank you, Moses, Wendell, and Vanessa for always thinking of me to provide words to our colleagues across New Jersey. And so it is a pleasure to be with you. So I believe your question is, what has really helped me in the progression of my career? I think when I think back over the many years that I've been working, one of the things that I can say is that I took a very strategic approach to my career. I did a strategic plan just around where I wanted to be. And when in college, so I knew that one day I wanted to be a senior executive of human resources. I went to school, went to UNC Charlotte, and majored in management, and immediately took a few human resources classes. And I don't need to tell you the why I took HR. I can tell you that I was not doing well in finance and accounting. And so I needed to boost my GPA. And I think some people have heard me say this story before. And, you know, I needed to boost my GPA. I took HR as an elective, and I made an A. And I said, well, there's something to this. I'm going to take one more and see if I can get my GPA up some more, because I'm in a sorority and I have to remain compliant to be a university student. And so I got another A. And I took a marketing and communications course and kept getting A's. And so I said, there is something to the communications, the marketing, and the HR for me. And
Right.
so I set the course towards HR. I quickly began to learn about the various careers, and I can tell you that during that time, I knew that I wanted to be a leader. And so I took a strategic approach. I was focused, and I executed on my plan. But along the way, I had some great mentors, great sponsors, and people that I followed that really helped me around the trajectory of my career.
That's great. So really early on, you found your calling, let's say.
I did. I found my place.
You found your place. Great.
I found my place.
Next question is, what are the 3 most common career mistakes that you've seen during your time?
The first I would say is folks not betting on themselves, right? Not believing in yourself enough to know that you can leave a particular job, change careers, and really plot your course. But you got to believe in yourself and you got to prepare. So I would say that first. Making decisions based on salary alone, and not really thinking about the broader scope of your career and what different experiences you need to gather and to get the salary that you want. The other would be believing that your career is someone else's responsibility. And I've met with even individuals on my team, former teams, who have told me that, you know, you've got to figure out what I need to do next. And I think you as an individual have to know what you want to do and see in yourself where you believe you should be. And then the role of your leader and others that support you are to help you get there. But delivering your career to someone else, you're doing yourself a disservice. So those are probably my top 3 things: not betting on yourself, focusing on salary, and really not taking ownership of your career and believing that it's someone else's responsibility.
Well, that kind of leads me into another point. You know, very often when you speak to individuals or you speak to executives, we always think about the mentor and the sponsor. And there's a difference between the 2.
Yes.
Could you explain the different roles that a mentor plays and a sponsor?
I'm a storyteller by nature, but so I will give you an example. I've had individuals in my life that have been great mentors. They've given me advice. They helped me learn a particular task. And then I've had an individual or 2 individuals that I can think of who cleared the path for my next place of employment to the point that I didn't have to interview, right? And so those two individuals that were sponsors were totally different than my mentors. My sponsors actually knew me and I didn't know them.
Wow.
So my mentor guided, you know, the folks that come to mind from a mentorship perspective guided me, provided advice. I did the same for them. But there were 2 people that said, you know, I believe that you can do this. And so therefore, I think you need to pick up from North Carolina and you need to go to the next place. You need to go to Texas. They already know about you. I've already talked to them about you. And all you have to do is go meet them. It's now about, is there a fit? They know you can do the job because I told them you could. I told them what you could deliver. Same for the role that I'm in now. There was someone who thought enough of me to say, I know the perfect person for you. So a mentor is, you know, someone definitely in your career, you need to have a mentor, identify someone that can provide you the advice and the counsel that you need. But it's hard, you don't necessarily go after a sponsor. A sponsor, most of the time will seek you out. There are individuals that know of your track record, and that's been my experience.
Yes, and that ties back into, as you mentioned before, belief in yourself. That belief will then transform itself to that sponsor, recognizing that belief that you have.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's great, that's great. Now, obviously, the past let's say 6 months, and even probably further, but certainly in the last 6 months, the work environment has changed a lot.
Absolutely.
Some of us probably on this call are working from home. Maybe some are working in the office, maybe, you know, a short time in and another time out. How do you think an individual can keep themselves relevant in this current environment?
So if they're working from home, or if
Just in the environment itself, and then I'm going to go to working from home, working remotely.
So definitely in healthcare, we need to continue to stay abreast as healthcare professionals. We need to stay abreast of what is going on in our marketplace, and really focus on how COVID is impacting communities, how COVID is impacting our finances, and really paying attention to that the pandemic and all of the complexities that it brings to work, as well as paying attention to what is going on as it relates to Black Lives Matters, as it relates to social determinants of health. We need to be able to see the full picture and be able to tell the story of the impact. We got to be relevant in that regard. But we also need to pay attention to other things, other industries. We need to pay attention to digital. We need to pay attention to what is going on in the tech environment, how people are working differently, because that will impact us from a career perspective. You know, and thinking about some of those, looking at the Wall Street Journal, reading that, making sure that we're paying attention to fact-based news, right? Not the news that fits our lens, but be open and expanding to hear what others are listening to, and also focusing on the facts. So not too far to the left, not too far to the right, but paying attention to what is going on around us, and being able to form different opinions around some very key topics.
Correct. I always think that you always must, no matter what role that you play, you must be familiar or at least aware of what's going on in your industry.
Absolutely.
You know, especially in the healthcare industry with consolidations and changes and hospitals being brought into other healthcare systems. It's always good to be aware of what's going on.
Absolutely.
So, bringing the next question to working remotely.
Yes.
Do you think there'll be a hindrance when it comes time for promotion?
If you let it be a hindrance, it will be. And so if you are not showing up at your best every day for the Zoom calls, it could be. If you, some people are going into the office on occasion and you decide, well, no, I'm just going to stay here. I'm chilling right here at the house. It could be, right? If you're not engaging in collaborative conversations, if you are not reaching out and seeing what else you could do to further your department or your organization as a whole, it could be. But what I will say is, you know, remaining relevant and having conversations beyond what you currently do helps with that.
Right.
But you got to stay focused. It's easy to be unfocused when at home. I'm at home right now. But I have spent all of the pandemic time at the office. And the question always came up around, well, why do you go to the office every day? Because my job is to support 17,000 team members, then I have to be at the office at times to do that. And I need to be involved in those strategic conversations. So I don't want, if our CEO is there and other executives having strategic conversations, I want to be in the room for that. Not to say that I didn't social distance, I didn't wear a mask. I did all of those things. And I tried really hard to keep myself safe, as well as the 17,000 people that work for Atlantic. And we did the best that we could. But I think we can't fool ourselves into thinking that when out of sight is truly sometimes out of mind. And so if you're working from home and you never talk with colleagues and you never really engage with your leader, then you need to figure out how you're going to get engaged so that they recognize that you're still here. Hey, I'm still here. And this is what I'm delivering on.
Correct. That's good advice, yes. So with that being said, and that time comes, when do you recommend you should start planning for your next role?
So you should start when you're ready to start plan. I don't think there is one set time, but remember how we started this conversation, you should always have a plan. So as you're thinking of your journey, because your career should be a journey, right? Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes across, sometimes it may dip back down so that you could go up higher. So if you're doing planning, you kind of know the experiences you need to gain to be able to support your end game. So I had one of my favorite HR executives told me once that there was a way that you move in your career, and I had never thought of it this way. You think of the end before you think of your second job. So in your first job, you have to identify, which I did, but I never knew I was doing that. Think of where you want to be at the end of your career.
Wow.
And then as you go through your work journey, you're planning and you're plotting and planning how you're going to get to that chosen place. If you do it that way, if you arrive at your destination early, great. If you decide to get out of what you're doing and I just don't like it, you still, when you get the next role, you still need to think about the end.
Right.
So you pace yourself in that way. As an executive, you have to think about it in 5-year increments. Didn't know that, right? And so where do you want to be? At what point do you want to retire? And if you plan to retire around retirement age, let's say you chose 65, then you need to be at your last job probably by 59 or 60. So you have to plan your moves appropriately. I had never thought of that, but I began to use that, and I learned that in my 20s. I began to use that to plot my career, and that is how that advice, what I learned, really helped me to get to where I am today.
That's great. Yep. That's certainly, I'm writing that down. That's certainly very good advice.
But don't you leave wherever you are, because they need you right now.
Right.
And everybody on this call, don't you tell on them.
Right. It's a secret.
Yes, it's a secret.
Right. The last question, what's the most effective way to approach someone for a job you may be interested in?
So do your research on the person. Use the psychology of it all. People like for you to flatter them. Right? They like for you to talk about them. And they like for you to give them an opportunity to talk about themselves. So what I would suggest that you do is reach out, make a phone call. Someone's not going to take your call, and be okay with that. But make the call, follow it up with an email, and then make another call. Give it a little bit of time. Follow them on LinkedIn, send them a message. And do it in an authentic, flattery way. It's like, Wendell, I, saw that you were in the New York Times and that you were recently promoted. Congratulations. Would love to catch up with you to hear about your journey. That's it. Don't say, can we set a time next week at 2:30? Don't do that. But use information. So do your research, use the information that you know to help you get an in. That way the person feels a little bit more connected to you than the piece of paper that may come to them from a recruiter or an online application. They can put then context around your credentials. So try to use a network. Always works. Network. Right. Say how you know someone who knows them. But networking is always good. Get folks to open the door for you. Say, can you just do an introduction for me? I know you've never worked for me or worked with me, but can you do an introduction to someone? Those are just a few tips. But if there's a job that you're interested in and you think that you have one of the skills, apply. Just one. If you think you have two, definitely call. Because we don't always believe in ourselves, in our abilities. We think that we, there's so many studies that talk about, how men believe that they have one of the credentials and women believe they have to have all of them. And so the men apply, they get the job and the women don't. But for people of color, it's even worse, right? So you gotta believe that you can do just about anything that's put out there. If you have the ability, if you have the background, if you know somebody, use those contacts and get the in that you need for the job. But apply again if you don't get it. If there's another one that comes open, just keep applying. But make sure that you stay out there and don't take rejection as that you're a failure. There are thousands of people right now that are unemployed, thousands upon thousands of people. And you can't let up off the gas pedal. Be willing to do something that you haven't done before. Be willing to take a demotion to get the promotion. But just work your career or your search for a new role, just like you would be at work working really hard. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. That's Nikki. Thank you very much. That's
You're
all
welcome.
very, very important. I think most importantly, what we take away from that is belief in yourself will lead you to many successes down the road. Nikki, again, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And right now, I'd like to send it back to Moses, who will introduce our next speaker. Moses.
Thank you, Wendell, and thank you, Nikki. Some
You're
great
welcome.
words and great advice that we'll definitely make note of and apply to our career paths. Next up, well, before I say this next part, I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please type that in the chat box. Towards the end of tonight, we have a Q&A session where we will be asking Nikki and Deanna those questions. So please don't be shy, type those questions in right away. And next up, I would like to welcome to the stage, Frank Nelson, who is the president-elect of NAHSE New Jersey. Frank, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much, Moses. Good evening, everyone. My name is Frank Nelson, and I am the president-elect of NAHSE New Jersey. It is my absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce Deanna Minus-Vincent. But before I do that, I do want to thank Nikki and as well as Wendell for such a dynamic dialogue regarding our careers and how we can navigate those things moving forward. In terms of next steps, as we think about our next speaker, Deanna Minus-Vincent currently serves as the corporate vice president for the social impact and community investment team at RWJBarnabas Health. In her role, Deanna works across the system with internal and external stakeholders to co-design strategies that improve health outcomes, promote health equity, and eliminate health disparities. Before coming to RWJBarnabas Health, Deanna served for more than 7 years as the Chief Engagement Officer at Benefits Data Trust, a national social change organization where she facilitated cross-sector partnerships, diversified the organization's revenue streams, and oversaw the organization's strategic positioning. Additionally, among other roles, she has served as the Assistant Commissioner for the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, Director of the Office of Institutional Advancement at the Stewart Country Day School in Princeton, and the Director of Planning and Development for the Central Jersey Family Health Consortium in North Brunswick. Deanna received a Master of Public Administration from Rutgers University and a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Morgan State University. Born and raised in Trenton, Deanna is a native New Jerseyan and lives in Lumberton with her husband, Daryl, and her daughter, Darren. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Deanna Minus-Vincent into our panel this evening. Deanna?
Thank you, Frank, and thank you so much, NAHSE, for having me. Nikki, after hearing your journey, I sound like a positive slacker. So I heard that you had an extremely strategic career route, and mine was the exact opposite. So I like to think of myself as a strategic planner. A lot of my career has been spent in that space, but even my education and my career path has been somewhat by happenstance. I started at Drexel University as an accounting major, And 2 years in, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I never want to do debits and credits. Like, this is horrible. And I became a sociology major, and I transferred to Morgan State, HBCU in Baltimore, Maryland.
Great move.
And I wanted to save the world. My entire family, most of my mother's sisters, she's one of 5, they went to Morgan, and I followed in their footsteps. And like I said, I was a sociology major, and then my career just kind of took its own trajectory. I worked in maternal child health planning, and while I loved it, I was crunching birth certificate data. I noticed that one of my former colleagues, she was an intern with me, she's on this call, and she followed me to state government as well. And if I was a labor and delivery nurse, I may have stayed in that role, but I didn't want to be pigeonholed. So the governor tapped me on the shoulder, and I followed that path, and my career has been wonderful, but it wasn't as planned out. I mean, I did have some pockets of planning, but I did not have my career path tracked the same way you did. But I have had a wonderful career. It's been diverse. It has provided me with a lot of robust experiences, and I wouldn't change a thing. Well, maybe a few things, but it got me to where I am right now. So Frank, I'll turn it over to you to have at it with the questions.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Deanna. And speaking of career, and in fact, currently in your role as the Vice President of Social Impact Community Investment, we know that traditionally companies in many industries were perceived to be amoral, essentially, really not considering the moral case associated with social and community impact. So in that sense, when you think about the need to improve the communities that we're serving, and the need for anchor institutions to take the lead, we're now seeing a lot of organizations, in fact, particularly in healthcare, taking that lead and really having a tremendous impact on those communities. So in your particular case, Deanna, and in fact, when you think about your role, would you take some time and really put it in context for us and help us understand the importance of such work? And now more than ever before, why is it so critical?
Certainly. So I am extremely fortunate to work at RWJBarnabas Health that has truly made a commitment to this work. 3 years ago, they took a step back and realized just clinical care was not making as much of a difference as we would like, especially in the communities that we serve. Literally, you could walk through our lobbies where there were marble floors, and there was, cherry wood and chandeliers, and into blighted communities. And we felt like we needed to do more, even with the very best clinical care. So we changed our mission, and we said that we were moving from healthcare to health. Our mission changed to improve the health of our communities. And with that, the social impact and community investment practice was born. And we are committed to improving health outcomes, increasing health equity, and eliminating disparities, not reducing them, not taking a step in the direction, eliminating them. So we focus on the social determinants of health, so affordable housing, food security, traditional things, community violence, and we do it all looking at systems change, policy, through a lens of equity. So my role, I am extremely privileged to take all of that haphazard career path to culminate this work into something that I'm really passionate about. And my portfolio specifically is on safe and affordable housing across the system, where we have several housing projects. And then my passion project is really to institute and integrate the social determinants of health into the clinical setting. So really any patient at some point, we're piloting it now, but at some point, every patient who walks through our doors in any clinical setting will be screened for their social determinants, because what we understand is that no longer can a diabetic walk through our doors and we simply give them medication that says take with food without us understanding A, can they afford their prescription? B, is there a grocery store in their neighborhood? C, do they know how to prepare the groceries that they get? Do they have transportation? And all of those things. We are taking the very best practices from the private sector. So using segmentation to make sure that we are appropriately asking them the questions, not just translating English to another language, but making sure that we build in all of those cultural competencies, and then finally connecting them to services and supports, and then streamlining access to any services that they may need. So that is one of the projects. And then finally, how do we use data and technology in a more streamlined way is also under my purview, as well as equity within the social impact practice. So.
Great. And so, and when you think about the overall economic impact as well, I know that oftentimes there's a need for organizations and larger companies to begin to invest in their communities by doing business with those minority-owned businesses in the community. Could you expand on the importance of that?
Sure. We've spent a lot of time on our anchor mission. So really how we buy, hire, and invest local. What we understand is that we can no longer procure goods and services from across the country or across the globe. That if in fact we are going to change that juxtaposition between our marbled floors and broken concrete, that we need to invest in our communities. So really, how do we buy and make a commitment to buy from small, local, minority, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses? How do we hire from the communities in which we serve? And then how do we invest in those communities? So how do we invest in housing? How do we invest in not just one-off programs as far as food security, but how do we change the systemic issues that surround those things? Because while we can help 100 people today, like for instance, we did build the Beth greenhouse, but it wasn't until we made sure that SNAP and WIC policies were changed until we really created systemic change. And how we're really able to do that is having leadership that's behind that.
Absolutely. You mentioned the word systemic issues that are actually behind those factors. So as we think of, if an organization is thinking about implementing similar models within your institution, so how do you go about addressing those systemic barriers and really, chip away at it bit by bit, ultimately resulting into equity in the long term?
I think leadership that understands the plight, leadership that understands this work is messy, leadership that understands that maybe some people will not get on board and is willing to address that as well. Leadership that is that allows you to be entrepreneurial, which isn't always there. I think at times I've worked at organizations that wants everything to be rote, but this work requires you to be entrepreneurial, to test and refine and evaluate, test, evaluate, refine on a continual basis. I think ensuring that you have a diverse team that brings a variety of lived and learned experiences, I think that really matters. And then strong partnerships across sectors, realizing what you know and what you don't know. Sure, we could build a data-driven process that looks at segmentation, but why should we? I mean, Target knows exactly what I'm gonna buy, when I'm gonna buy it, and how I should buy it. I mean, I often tell my husband that I had to buy that pair of shoes because literally I picked it up in Nordstrom and it chased me down on my social media platforms. I had no other choice but to buy it. So if they know how to do that, then healthcare and social services should be able to use data in that same way. So data for good. So, but we just haven't caught up. And if we haven't caught up and other sectors have, we need to use that as opposed to trying to build it ourselves.
That's such a great point. And I think one of the key words that you mentioned here that struck my attention is the word diversity. Oftentimes, when we're looking at diversity and addressing diversity in education, what we see is that there's often a pay inequities. And we know that data has shown, and a lot of literature actually has shown that white individuals essentially they get paid more for the exact same role than people of color. In fact, for women of color, African American women in particular, they get further discounted on that model, and particularly due to the intersectionality between their race and their gender. So as an African American woman, and what has been your personal experience working in leadership roles throughout your career? And how do you think that those barriers has really impacted your overall trajectory and the inequities that you had to face as well?
So, Frank, I wish I could tell you that it's been easy and that it's been just all a bed of roses. You know, there's an expression that white women have to break through the glass ceiling where Black women have to hit our heads against the concrete one. And I know for my own story, I'm only speaking for my own story. I've experienced challenges. I, again, look to my colleague who I dragged with me from the nonprofit to state government, and I hope that it was a positive experience for her. We went through some rough times, but let me just kind of walk you through, because I too, Nikki, am a storyteller. And so imagine walking into state government. I was what I believed to be young at the time. I was, early 30s and put into a position of power. I was an appointee. And first 4 days on the job, I was called a darky. I was picketed during my time there. Men used my picture on the urinal as target practice. And that was just, and there were similar incidences in other roles. But I think the reason you go through those things is to hope. I have one daughter, and I hope that she doesn't have to go through similar things. And those are the monumental things that you go through. That doesn't even address the times that you're sitting in a boardroom and you are invisible, or you make a suggestion and it's virtually ignored. And then a white counterpart, particularly at times a white male counterpart, and all of a sudden it is a phenomenal idea. Like, wow, how'd you ever think of that? Probably because I just said it. So those are the types of things that you deal with. But I think as you learn to get better at navigation and how to put your ideas on paper, and you learn how to CC the right people and make sure that your ideas are heard in different ways, you just learn how to continue to navigate. By no means has this stopped me from progressing. And I think the same things are seen. My sister has worked on the opposite side in corporate America, and she's seen the same things. You just need to figure out how to navigate and navigate smartly.
Sure, and thank you for sharing, for such transparency, Deanna. As we think about,
well, we're among friends, right? We're among friends. Yeah.
Most certainly, and as we know, in light of recent events that have happened in the country nationally, the recent killing of Mr. Floyd, and now many companies are actually coming out and expressing support for the Black Lives Matter movement, and ultimately, many African Americans actually see that as almost of a marketing initiative. Now that they want to be on the right side of history. So, as one who's experienced racism within an organizational setting, what do you think are some of the things that can be utilized to really have some tangible initiatives? Not just the statements, not just the verbal support, not just the hashtag in the post, but rather some concrete organizational initiatives that can actually address structural racism. So
I've thought about this a lot, because I think about how the tide has been slow to turn. We think about, we think 7 years ago with Trayvon Martin, and we think about how we got angry and how there was an uproar. I hearken back to my mother, and Frank, I know I told you this story. My mother also went to Morgan. She was an anomaly in that she had 5 sisters. They all went to college, 3 of which have master's degrees. And when my mother was there, she was thrown into prison because she integrated a movie theater. And I just got a flyer in the mail where Morgan owns that shopping center, and they just built a huge building on it. She just got an honorary doctorate for her integration. And it wasn't jail, it was prison, because the jails were full, you know, hosed down with lie. And she never thought that her grandchildren had to fight the same fight. And I think in order to make tangible change at this point, we need to, and I have seen some substantive change at this point because I think we're all tired. We're tired of the fights and the fits and starts. So I think I've made a commitment to myself that we need to fight the small things with the same vigor. We can't let the off-color jokes pass. We can't let being invisible in meetings pass. We have to stand up, and it starts with open, honest dialogue. I spent 40 minutes in the grocery store informing, and I know it's not my job to teach my counterparts about racism, but I did spend my 40 minutes in the grocery store explaining racism and systemic racism with one of my daughter's friends' mothers who just didn't know. She thought there hadn't been any Black killings by police officers since Trayvon or since Freddie Gray. So she just had no clue that 235 Black people had been killed by the hands of police in 2019. So I did spend that time, but then she's going to tell her friends, and then it's going to be cyclical. But I think we need to do it with purpose. I think we need to be intentional. I guess I'm just not sure that in more recent years that we've been committed. I mean, 27 years Mandela spent in prison. Riders chose not to ride the bus for 380 days in the Montgomery bus boycotts. I had a member of my team said, well, on July 7th, we're not going to spend our money. Okay, well, we're going to spend it on July 8th. Who cares? I mean, and maybe I'm old and crotchety but we're going to do it the next day, or we weren't going to watch football, but so I think we need to be committed, because this work, it takes real change, and it takes a commitment. So, and I know I'm like on my soapbox now, but we need to take commitment, and it takes real change because it takes strength, and we have to start with these small things, because I guarantee that prior to it being a knee in George Floyd's neck, it was an off-colored joke, and then you got off on a harsh traffic stop, and then maybe you roughed someone up and they wrote you up, and then it was just a little thing, and then it was a knee in the neck. So if we don't start with the off-color joke, we're going to always be fighting the hard stuff.
Right, and I think one of the key things that you mentioned is really the power of unity. Think about as a people coming together and really being committed to fighting this fight. And it will not happen overnight, but certainly the unity and really being your brother's keeper essentially will help us get there. So as we move forward, in the interest of time, I do want to ask you one additional question, and possibly one last question is, so how do you encourage and mentor a young woman, a young Black woman who is thinking about becoming an executive and who wants to be in your shoes, who when they see you, they have hope and they want to be a healthcare leader one day, and yet they still have to navigate through those barriers and those disparities and those injustices within our organizational setting?
First and foremost, find your passion. If you don't love what you do, it's going to be really hard getting up in the morning. Have a support system. Take every opportunity. I started my career and at what is now the Central Jersey Family Health Consortium. But when I started, we were still under St. Peter's Hospital. We had 6 employees. We had a budget of under $700,000. And I've always, because I'm an avid reader, I also had good writing skills. And they said, well, Deanna, do you want to write this grant? And back then, there was no such thing as grant writing courses. Like, it just didn't happen. And they handed it to me. And I said, of course I'll do it. Even though I'm thinking like, I don't know what I'm doing. But so I wrote it, and I built my career on fundraising. My career has been built on raising millions and millions and millions of dollars. So take every opportunity, even if you're not sure. I mean, I would never say I could code something, because I have no clue how to do that. But within reason, take every opportunity, build your skill set. Part of the reason I'm here is because I have such a diverse skill set. I can think about things not just from the bleeding heart, but I can also think about the ROI, and I can talk to the finance people about it. Be a person of your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Definitely under promise and over deliver. Just always stick to your word. Some basic things, be punctual. And then I totally second what Nikki said, have quality mentors, have people that you can run ideas off. As you get higher in this place and space, there's not a lot of people, and not to say that you can't have diverse mentors, but there is something to be said about talking to people who look like you, who've experienced things that you have, and just having mentors and people that you can bounce ideas off of, and sponsors. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I do have many more questions, but I do want to give an opportunity for our audience to actually be engaged and ask their questions as well. So I'd like to thank you, Deanna. And now we'll pass it back over to Moses, who will facilitate the next step of our conversation.
Thank you, Deanna. That was that was powerful. So really thank you for that. So right now we're going to have a Q&A session with our panelists. While both Nikki and Deanna were talking, we had a lot of people that typed a lot of great comments and questions in the chat box. So right now I'll turn it over to our community outreach chair, Ashley Clark, who will lead the Q&A portion. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So our first question is directed toward Nikki. This is coming from Donna Lawson. In the new norm of virtual meetings and social distancing, how do you continue to network and make connections?
So Donna Lawson is actually one of my colleagues at Atlantic Health. She's an African-American VP at Atlantic Health System, and she is the Vice President of Quality. She leads infection prevention, as well as our regulatory compliance. So Donna and I have this conversation on occasion. How do we get out and connect with others? Well, it's a difficult time right now, but certainly sessions like this, it's a great opportunity to network. I think we definitely need to have more of these kind of discussions, and also have an opportunity. Zoom allows us to break out as well, and really talk in smaller groups. But I think we need to, as you know, we're in a time where we can't come together socially in person unless we can social distance. If we can figure it out, let's do that. But I think sessions like this that are planned for us, and we get more people involved, I think it would be great. So I think it is about networking, and if we can do this online, great.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Right, so our next question is for Deanna. Oftentimes, the leadership at the top of the organization does not reflect the communities they serve. How can we change this?
So I definitely concur. I think at RWJBarnabas Health, they're making a concerted effort to do that, both to, and Frank can speak to this as he works in D&I, but I think both how we find individuals to interview who look like the community that we serve. So they've made a concerted effort to do that, both for senior leadership as well as our boards. So that's a concerted effort. I know in other organizations I've worked for in the past, it's been a constant struggle. I don't know that every organization I've worked for has always been as motivated, but I know at RWJBH, it has been a concerted effort to move in that direction.
Yeah, I would agree as well. Diversity has been a focus since I joined Atlantic, and actually since Brian Granulotti became the CEO 5 years ago, and he hired me 4 years ago. And one of the things we talked about was the need for diversity across the organization. And since that time, not just from a racial perspective, a place for women as well. And so now our executive team is 53% female. And we're really proud of that. And then our senior leadership team, which I'm a part of, is 50%. It's 50% male, 50% female. I am the only African-American individual that is on the senior most executive team, but we do have other African-American executives. So I mentioned Donna Lawson, Armand Kinsey as well. We are very lean from an executive perspective, but we do have some executive openings right now. We have a chief information officer position that is open, chief information and digital officer, chief marketing officer that I'll be posting in the next few days. We are looking for someone to support us from an innovation perspective as well. So there are other opportunities for us to increase representation of underrepresented groups on our executive team, and that is a focus. So, you know, like Deanna, I think organizations have to make this a priority. You know, I think being in New Jersey, I believe that now, even in the times that we live in, it will continue to be a priority. But we have to make sure that we apply for those jobs, we seek out the jobs, we work with search firms. They're not going to be on Indeed.com. They may not be there, but they will be with search firms. And we need to make sure that if you're an executive or you're looking to be an executive, you contact those big firms to make yourself known so that you can be found. Many organizations hide leaders, right? That's what they do so that you won't be picked off. And that's what happened to me when I was at Carolina's healthcare system, now Atrium Health. I was within HR and no one knew who I was. And because we had relationships with search firms that prohibited them from being able to reach in and really recruit the talent there. So you have to make yourself known to search firms as well. Whit Kiefer's one, B.E. Smith. Those, look for ones that deal in healthcare. Checka. There's a ton of search firms out there, but definitely make sure you're using LinkedIn to be able to position yourself so that you can look for an executive role. And then going to the boardroom, that's increasingly important as well. We have our first African-American member of the board, Dr. Jackson, who is she was an OBGYN, and she is an integral part of the board. And we have 2 board seats now. And the board has said that they would love to have diversity in those roles. And if we can get a diversity candidate, we will. So, you know, I think making it a priority, Armand Kinsey is on this call as well. And we have this conversation at the executive level all the time. And it's not just Armand and I talking about it. We talk to the CEO and we all have this conversation around how are we, when we have an opportunity, how are we going to increase representation?
Just one more thing. While RWJBH has done a really great job of starting with diversity, I've also sat at tables where it's diverse, but inclusion is nil.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd rather a company be slow and methodical about diversity and inclusion than having me sit there and my ideas and thoughts are discounted.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely, I totally agree.
Thank you both for sharing. I actually have a great question in the chat as we were mentioning diversity and being the only person of color in a room, either female or male. This question was from Aaron Dennis. He says, as the invisible man in room, many in the C-suite and a department head, what suggestions do you have for conflict resolution?
So there's a great book called Crucial Conversations. And I would suggest you read that book because it gives you some great tips on how to have conversations that may be difficult. One of the things that I can tell you is that when I joined Atlantic Health, first I moved from the South. And so while I love to think my accent is gone, I know that it is still very country. I think it's improving, but when I first started, I didn't sound the way I sound now. And I would sit back, and my upbringing is when grown people are talking, you be quiet. I am one of the youngest individuals on our executive team. And so when I entered the room, I would listen because I thought it was an opportunity for me to learn. And I think my second week there, Brian Granulati, our CEO, said, they were having a conversation, and it was they. Even though I was new to the team, I still didn't want to jump in yet. And he said, he looked at me like in the height of the conversation and said, Nikki, I need you to use your voice. And I thought, oh, when I use my voice, y'all aren't going to be ready. And I told him this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about, just diversity. And he and I just sit and talk sometimes. And I said, I remember when you said that I needed to use my voice. And I thought, I use my voice. And I think I do it pretty well. But what he was doing was really giving me space to do that. Not all leaders do that. Not all white males do that. And not all white females will do that. But you have a voice and you need to use it. And so when there is conflict amongst the group, you need to also read something around adaptive change. There will be conflict, and you got to be comfortable in conflict. Conflict doesn't mean you go toe to toe and you start, like tit for tat. You state facts, you stay on fact, you build a coalition outside of the room as well. You socialize your thoughts, right? So there is a way that by the time you get to the room, everybody knows and it's like, yeah, we're gonna do what she said, or yeah. So there is a way that you can do that. I'd love to talk to you some more about the issue itself, but there are ways that you can navigate conversations through negotiation skills, through crucial conversations, whatever it is, and you can bend things in your favor, but you got to know how to structure the conversation. This is not central to just us. It is other women generally have difficulty. I coach women around this all the time, how to have the conversation, how to not throw information out there, but go in with a purpose. You got to know how the other person communicates. So I'd love to talk to you more. White fragility, I see somebody just posted that. That is a great one, as a great read as well.
I think exactly what you said, Nikki. Like, I've learned, especially in some of my former roles where it's a lot of data driven, like it's always, data indicates, research says, like it's never Deanna thinks, feels, or believes. Like, I mean, unless it calls for it, but normally it's a lot of fact-based, because I've noticed that, a lot of times we are second guessed. Just because I think that's just the nature of the beast in some places and spaces. Like, so I do tend to come with a lot of fact-based, because in conflict in some of those places, then we need to be armed in a different sort of way.
Right.
Okay. Thank you both. So this question that we have here is leading back into the recruitment side, the mentoring side that we were mentioning earlier. So this question's from Judy Washington. She wants to know, how are you recruiting the next generation of healthcare leaders to meet the goals of caring for your community?
That's a great question. Dr. Washington is actually one of the physicians at Atlantic Health as well. So what we're doing, we work with the Bluford Institute, and the Bluford Institute allows us to be able to bring in diverse healthcare professionals who have made healthcare administration or healthcare leadership their focus. So we work with the Bluford Institute. That's one way. Another way that we do it is that when we have interns, since I've joined Atlantic, we've made sure that we are working with individuals outside of the majority. So we look for opportunities to bring students in and give them other opportunities to work with our leaders and departments. Armand Kinsey is very focused right now in working with our resident coordinator, one of the physicians on the team, to really begin to understand how residents are selected. Armand is actually the first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Atlantic Health. And so we have been very focused in 4 areas. The first is we are working on our workforce. We're working with patients in our communities that we serve. We're working, just as Deanna said, making sure that we have a good supplier or business diversity program that supports minority women, veterans, small business owners. And we're also making sure the fourth is the community base. So patients, workforce, MWBBE, supplier diversity, and how we support our community. So we're looking for new ways in which we engage differently. Like RWJ, we have housing as well as a part of what we do. We have housing right behind Morristown Medical Center, right near Overlook Medical Center. And so we're trying to make sure that we're doing what we can to support our communities also. I think that there is a mentoring program that I know that Dr. Johnson is looking to begin. She has introduced a program where she was working organically with students to help them get into medical school. So there are a lot of different things that are going on in Atlantic, some of them just starting. But I think that right now we're just really trying to figure out how we just not bring in residents, how not we just bring in students, but really focused on how do we bring in experienced individuals as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question is from Tiara. This is for you, Deanna, specifically. Who or what keeps you motivated, both professionally and mentally?
My job is my hobby, which is it might be pretty sad, but it is. And I think also just growing up in Trenton and seeing just so much need. So I think just trying to make change, and also just an intense competition with myself. So every day I wake up trying to do better and to outpace myself. So for instance, if I got a $2 million grant from Walmart today, can I get a $4 million grant tomorrow to continue to do this work better, stronger, and faster? Because the need is just so inordinate, and we have so much to do. So I think the competition of competing with myself, but also because there's just so much more work that we have to do. There's so much need. We just have so much need in our region, and we have so much need across New Jersey. So that keeps me motivated, and what keeps me sane is my family.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So this question is for the both of you. This is from Lashari. What advice do you have for those seeking senior executive mentorship similar to you amazing ladies? It can be challenging to network, express interest, and be visible remotely.
So, I do have individuals that reach out to me through LinkedIn quite often through the message feature, and ask if they could just talk just for a little bit. I would suggest that you not start the conversation with, will you be my mentor? Because I think you just start the conversation with, can we just talk and can I get your advice? There is one woman that I mentor in Texas who she's not in healthcare. She works for a car dealership and she leads HR for a dealership, but it's a fleet of just, various cars, right? Various dealerships, but it's a auto group. And she just said, you're someone that she played to, I've been following you. And, what do you say to somebody at that point? It's like, oh, okay. You don't say, okay, well, I'd like to hear more. I said, okay. I said, well, great. And she told me specifically what she was trying to do and how I could help her. And it was easy for me to say, okay. And she ended our conversation when we finally talked with, can I reach out to you at least about maybe twice a year just to kind of check in and get your advice? Yep, that's a mentor. But she didn't say, will you be my mentor? I do. I take every week, I make a commitment to 30 minutes for a woman and a woman of color. And so it could be somebody who reached out to me on LinkedIn. It could be somebody on my team. It could be somebody who works for the organization. But I think taking time, there are executives, women and men who would love to spend time with you. But to say, will you be my mentor for a year? That's hard. But if you say, can I talk to you on occasion? I'm with you for that. That's just me.
Right. I definitely agree. I think because if you reach out and say, will you be my mentor? I don't know if we're going to be in sync yet.
Right.
We may not mesh. I think also, because I think all relationships kind of start where my story ends and your story begins. Mm-hmm. My daughter, she's a rising sophomore in college. And she's been reaching out to people who went to her same college, people in the tech field. So she's been reaching out to people at Google, and they've been responding, and she's been having all these calls these past couple weeks. And I was like surprised, like, they're reaching out to you, but she's been having all these amazing conversations. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, you go. So I'm like, all right. So, and I find the same thing, like a lot of women from Morgan reach out, or a lot of women who share stories, and sometimes it's a single conversation. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just that we click, and sometimes they may call me monthly, and sometimes I hear from them once or twice a year. But I really just love the opportunity, and normally it's women that I end up having a real connection with, and I mentor. I have one or two men, but I mean, not since there's anything against men, but it's just women. I have this connection with women. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it's just projects I take on, like my sister and I don't know if you guys have been following since this whole movement, since George Floyd, there's been a whole movement, Blacks at the Ivy League, Blacks at different prep schools on Instagram. So my sister and I, our school, and my daughters, so we've taken on this movement of kind of moving Black girls at our prep school, where it's just been so much discrimination for the past 50 years, 30 since my sister and I, and since my daughter. So we've taken on a whole collection of Black girls to just kind of move beyond the stories. So I think it's just where you find intersectionality and how you move those stories forward, and how do you ask? I agree with Nikki. It's one person at a time, and it's one single question and a specific ask.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. So there are definitely a few good questions in the chat that we may not be able to get to. So I do advise everyone to follow both Nikki and Deanna on LinkedIn if they have. Connect with them if you may. But for Deanna and Nikki, is there any final words of advice or anything that you can give to our attendees as we start to get to a close?
Mm-hmm. Deanna, do you want to go? Or? I will say this, look for, when you are looking to connect with other women, they don't have to be in the same profession as you, right? You can learn something from just about anyone. So I would encourage you to seek out some folks that are not necessarily just like you, not necessarily in your profession. You should have someone, but look for people that are in other spaces that you can benefit from their knowledge. One of the things that I've learned since I've been in New Jersey is that there are, especially women that I've encountered, I've met 3 very I would say really good friends, people I've bonded with since I've been in New Jersey through NAHSE. I have met Betty Jarvis, who is, I believe, on this call. And Betty is in an industry that is not in the same, she wasn't in the same space as me. I've met Betty. I've met Vanessa. And Vanessa and I have, we don't talk often, but I know that if I need anything, I can reach out to Vanessa. And when we talk, it is one of laughter. And I've met a former executive with United Health, who I have gone over to her place for Super Bowl parties, and we have really bonded. So, and she's not in healthcare delivery. So look for people that you connect with, just that you really, and I'll say that you vibe with. It is, if you can do that, like I like her style, I like his style, I can do, I feel them. Reach out to them, right? And if you have some common interest, try to bond around that. You don't have to come out and say, it's just weird to say, will you be my mentor? No, just say, didn't that feel weird? Will you be my mentor? Just say, I would love to connect with you. I think that, I can learn a lot from you. And, all the things that we've said, but I'll end with that. And again, go back to, we got this. And if you don't believe in you, it's going to be hard for me to believe in you. If you don't believe in your abilities, if you think I'm responsible for the way you move from here on out, I can tell you, I'm just trying to keep myself on track. You gotta own who you are, what you do, and have confidence that you can do just about anything you put your mind to. We are resilient people. We can do anything. And so each one teach one and pull somebody else up as you move.
And my final words are just be passionate with what you do. We do not have the same luxuries. We have to show up differently. And I think we all know that. So always be prepared. Takia, thank you so much for the shout out in the chat. I truly appreciate that, and I appreciate you. I think my parents instilled in me, as I'm sure in a lot of you, that and I guess the colloquialism is the black tax, that we have to be 2, 3, 4 times better to earn half as much. I mean, it might be a little more than half as much. My mother's favorite saying was, practice does not make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. So you can't expect to play the piano badly and all the time and continue to do it that way, and then at the recital expect to get it right. So as a teacher, she just drummed it into our heads, which is, I mean, at this point it's a little unfortunate, but that's the burden that we have to bear. And that's why we have to try to find some sort of equity so that we don't have to put those same sorts of burdens onto future generations just so they are left not making equal, and while they're struggling to do more and more and more. So show up and make sure that somehow we try to fight every day, the small fights with vigor, so that our kids and our grandkids are not struggling with the same issues that we're struggling with today. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you both. Thank you. I see all the messages in the chat, and I completely agree. There are definitely a lot of takeaways from what both of you have said. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Wendell as we begin to close, but thank you both for a great discussion.
My pleasure.
So Deanna and Nikki, again, once again, thank you very much for those words. As I'm sitting here listening, many of those sayings that you have from your parents, Deanna, it's the very same ones I hear from my grandmother and mother as well growing up, and they of course stick with you for your lifetime. You know, and as a father of 3 young men, young Black men, as you can imagine, every time one of them steps out the door, you know, a thought goes through my head. You know, I say a prayer to make sure they have their safe return. But hopefully we get to a point where, as you said, those little battles are conquered and we can move forward. Again, at this time, I want to thank Deanna and Nikki for their time and their great insight and sharing it with us. I want to thank my team, the New Jersey chapter, everyone for their contributions for this great event. Please follow us on LinkedIn. You can find information for us or about us on our website as well. And again, please join us. We're planning later this year in the fall to have another conference. You'll find out more information about it coming soon. But again, for now, I'd like to say thank you again and good night.